Welcome back, everyone. Our next presenter is David Wilcock. This is David's third time to address the Congress. And on his last presentation, we were really amazed. It was just incredible to me the amount of growth that David had. Presence, communicative ability, direction, okay? Positive approaches. I don't really hardly have words to tell you where this guy is going. He is so far ahead of all of the rest of us, it's just not even funny. Right now, well, David is working on a major musical, cosmic opera. Yeah. Now this story is about an angelic being who actually was one of the creator beings that helped make Earth. But after Earth got made, he saw there was a little trouble because people weren't learning to love. And he decided to become human to see if he could help them solve the problems. Now, it kind of sounds to me like this might be a little bit of an allegory for David himself. You might not want me to say that, but I think maybe. Now, this is going to be available. It's going to have 25 songs. 25 songs. It's going to be available in mid-April, and David has agreed to play us a couple of them at the banquet tonight. I really and truly can't wait. But now what we're here to hear from today, okay? We're going to be hearing from one of the most brilliant minds alive today. I say that from my heart. I'm convinced of it. Planetary change, humanity's role. What the hell is going on? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Wilcock.
Thank you. All right. Audio, test 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Can everybody hear me? Hello? Test. Okay, so we're good. All right. No? Okay, test 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Audio, test 1, 2. There we go. Okay. Now we got some audio. All right. Bob asked me to play one of the songs off the album for you. For those of you who heard my recent appearance on Coast with George Norrie, we did play a little bit of this before, but not. You didn't hear the whole song. You only heard the beginning of it. So this might help to attract people back into the room as well, because we only have about half capacity right now, it looks like. So anyway, just to give you a primer on this part of the presentation, as Bob was saying, this is a story about an angelic being who volunteered to be human after having helped create the earth with a group of others, and then discovered that people were not learning the lessons of love. He goes through a whole range of human experiences once he comes here. That's what most of the album is about. And at this point, he's finally learned how to reconnect with his higher self and listen to that still small voice within. So we're going to start playing this, and hopefully it'll all work out. You guys ready in the back? Because here we go.
Ooh, I listen to you. Ooh, you carry me through.
Oh, this is me singing.
Are you the one I met within my dream? So it seems, a part of me, but something more. Ooh, I listen to you. Ooh, you carry me through. Are you the one I hear within my mind, intertwined? that's so true. What would you like me to do? Ooh, I listen to you, and you can't read me through.
There you have it. I would have had it twice as loud as that, but that's my professional discernment. All right. So the guitar work and most of the instrumental work that you hear on that song were done by my colleague Larry Sire, who's a multiple Grammy-winning musician. And that really has kind of redefined for me my whole career in terms of what I'm doing here. So what we're going to talk about, the other thing is the first slide here, which we should now have up on the screen. This is the album cover, which we commissioned the art for that. And it's kind of supposed to indicate the pattern of humanity that's in the mind of the galaxy, with the two birds coming in to make the eyes here, kind of representing masculine and feminine, and this sort of DNA consciousness field that we're going to be talking about in today's talk. So in order to get this part out of the way, because it's always been brought up in every conference, and I want to just say this, there is a similarity between myself and Edgar Cayce, which extends through to the astrology, and I think Bob mentioned that. So what you can see here is a collection of the two charts together, and these are just some of the most gross similarities between the two charts. All the inner planets are in the same signs and within a few degrees of angle from one another. And for those of you who haven't seen the picture already, here's the photo comparison between myself and Edgar Cayce. You can see there's a rather stunning resemblance there. So this is something I've known about since 1997, the end of 97, and it was very challenging for me to come out into the open with this. And in fact, the first time that I ever spoke publicly about this was here at this conference. However, I guess it was 2004 when we did that. And since that time, I really don't focus on it too much. We have a lot more to talk about today. I'd like to talk about how you're seeing this sudden push for disclosure in the mainstream media now. This is something that just came out recently. Look at the date. It's February the 15th, in which they're saying the galaxy has billions of Earths. So far, telescopes have been able to detect just over 300 planets, but they're now saying that there could be many Earths full of alien life. And so this is obviously, it's come out recently that this is where they're going. Another thing that I find very interesting here is a recent article that came out this year talking about how everyone who has blue eyes on the planet can be traced back to a single ancestor 10,000 years ago. And this gets into the idea of what some people like Bob Dean have been talking about regarding the notion that there are mixtures of ET races with human beings on this planet, and that in fact white people would be one example of a group that's not native to the planet, that's the result of interbreeding. So we're now seeing a scientific case we can make for that. Well, it would appear that there was a great deal of information imparted to our ancient world in the time of Atlantis, and they're even bragging about it really by putting this on the dollar bill, showing us a mystery that most of us do not understand. Why the eye is there, what does this all mean? Novosaurus Seclorum actually comes from a prophecy talking about the coming of a golden age on Earth. The literal translation is New World Order, but the original prophecy describes something that is not like the typical negative government takeover thing that most people are now talking about. Also, you want to look at the fact that when the capstone returns to the pyramid goes from being a six-sided object with a bottom, top, and four sides to a five-sided object. And that 5 indicates perfection, whereas the 6 indicates imperfection. So there's a lot of symbolism being given in this image, and it's put right in front of you so that when nobody bothers to look to figure out what it means, it gives them another excuse to laugh at us and feel like we don't have enough knowledge to really even appreciate what's going on behind the scenes here. And of course, you're seeing now with the financial situation in the world, this movement towards a new world order, so to speak. They're trying to like fast forward this whole thing, bring the nations together. And I wanted to share with you an interesting story back when I used to do intuitive readings, which I stopped in 2005, a woman contacted me at one point and said, well, David, I'm not really interested in a reading. I just wanted to help make a decision. Maybe you can help me make this decision. Okay. Okay, here's the deal, she says. Either I have attained enlightenment, in which case I just jump off a cliff like one of the Native American shamans would, because once you've attained enlightenment, there's no point in being human, or none of the stuff that I believe is really true, and I have no point in being here, and I should kill myself. I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is, should you kill yourself or should you kill yourself? That was the question. So, how this relates to what's going on now is that we're all dealing with a great deal of pressures, and there's a lot of things out there that are fearful that have brought us away from our center. And so one of the things that has made me such a popular speaker on the internet and why I got invited to do the last talk here is that I bring a consistently positive message to the things that are going on. So I would like to just put that on the table before we go through more slides and say that what you're going to hear in this talk is not doom and gloom, it's not fear and disaster. It's actually describing a scientific case where we can establish that all the changes that you see happening on the earth right now are actually pointing us in a positive direction rather than a negative direction. Well, thank you. I'm glad that was applause-worthy. That should be. So, how many people saw this Institute for Human Continuity website? If you're on MySpace all the time, which I am because that's how people can get to me sometimes. This was a website that was actually put out by Sony Pictures, and they're telling you, join the 2012 lottery, as if they're saying, you know, who's going to be saved from 2012. So it actually came out in the open in mainstream media that Sony Pictures was cashing in on 2012 fear. So you're seeing now it's becoming more and more mainstream. There's movies coming out about 2012. And in fact, the Dutch, where marijuana is legal, most people are getting paranoid about 2012. Maybe marijuana has something to do with that, who knows? But there they are, and they're preparing for this apocalypse in 2012. Now again, it's really easy to look at some earth changes and look at some things that would suggest that something difficult is happening on the planet. I'm not denying that. It's supposed to be scary right now. But it's scaring us not to death, it's scaring us to life. That's the point. We are being scared into an awakening so that we're shown that the way that we've been doing things will no longer work. And I'm really delighted to see movements being made in Congress right now to potentially tear down the Federal Reserve and get us back on Treasury notes instead of Federal Reserve notes. Thank God. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to deviate off course. It's going to seem that way, but you're going to see how this all ties together. Because we're going to talk about something that is the missing link. In all these ancient traditions, they have something called radiant mind energy, which is their top secret. All these Masonic traditions in which you're sitting there and they have the compass and square, right? You're drawing geometry. And those geometric sketches that you're making are intended to harmonize your consciousness with the universe. The reason why there's such secrecy and intrigue around these groups is that they believe that when you follow these Masonic practices, that you can become God where none exists. Okay? You're going to see in the course of this presentation that there is in fact an energy field that is the precursor to all levels of manifest reality on this planet. And when I say precursor, what I mean is it's underneath physical matter. Physical matter would not exist without the time field. Consciousness would not exist without the time field. Your mind is actually a time field phenomenon rather than something in the brain. Just look at the fact that you have a near-death experience, and you can see what's going on in the room, and this has been documented. There's many studies that have proven that people really have this experience where they're clinically brain dead, but they're over their body, and they still have a continuous perception, suggesting that your mind, your consciousness, is an energetic phenomenon that is only associated with the body, but is not reliant upon the body to exist. So, this gets really strange because the time field is what powers physical matter. It's what powers biology. It is the source of life. You've heard of these non-eating saints who can get by just by breathing and taking in sunlight, like HRM, that guy that does the sun gazing. And they've scientifically studied him and found out that, in fact, he does not need any food. He only drinks water, and he goes out in the sun, stares at the sun as it's setting every day, which is not recommended. It can burn your retinas if you don't work your way into it. I don't do it. But anyway, think about the idea now that the planets, as they go around the sun, are being driven by some sort of force. Now, most of the time we would say, oh, it's centrifugal force. But there's some reason why the planets keep going. And it's that movement of the planets that's ultimately responsible for wind currents on the Earth, which is ultimately responsible for why a tree gets blown over in the forest. So ultimately, the energy that is pushing the planet around, that pushes the wind, that makes the tree fall over, is the energy that powers time, the time field. Okay, this is a whole new way of thinking about reality. It's the idea that the energy that feeds matter, that's making these little atoms whirl around, is also affecting the rate of time. So this was confirmed by some studies that were done by Dr. Wilbert Smith, who was a 1950s UFO researcher. We're going to talk a little bit about what happened there. In 1952, he was contacted as part of one of 12 different groups by radio telegraph, using a ham radio to get telegraph signals, kind of the primitive internet. And he was personally contacted, and a book was written about all this by Michelle Dobrenovich or George Hunt Williamson called The Saucer Speak. Now what happens is, this is not your typical contact like you'd read about on the net today, in which somebody says, oh, I woke up in the morning and I started to hear the voice of ETs. This is literally, go into the backyard. And they go into the backyard and there's a saucer sitting in the backyard. Because at this point in our history, ETs were still doing that. They've kind of gotten away from that because of the fact, ultimately, that it would pump up people's ego too much and make them feel special and different from other people. That was an unanticipated consequence, from what I've read. So they hid W.B. Smith's identity in this book, but that's the scientist they're referring to in the book. Now, the ETs explained that our solar system was moving into a more energized region of our galaxy. And that's a very, very fundamental point that you're going to see come back as we talk about 2012 here. This would create measurable increases in cosmic ray bombardment, and it would ultimately transform the entire solar system. Very important. They also said the message was given to world governments, but that the governments did not listen. Now, he said that there was a lot of information they got in the course of extensive contact that created reams and reams of written material, some of which we're going to see at the end a little bit. Much of the info cast serious doubts upon the validity of basic concepts of our science. They told us that time was a field function and that it differed as you go from one part of the universe to another. So again, time is what powers physical matter, and if you speed up the time field in a small area, time will actually travel faster in that area. So what this means is, if you sped up the time field right around this podium, then I might all of a sudden be frozen like this. And I would have no idea that anything had happened, except that all of a sudden everything here in the audience would go really fast, and I'd be like, what the hell is going on? But it'd be very slow for you guys. You just see me stuck like that. And if you remember the story of the Philadelphia experiment, this is exactly what happened. There were guys that were stuck, and they couldn't even move, and you had to rub their skin in order to wake them up back into our current field of time. So we're going to get into why this is important. They also said time could be altered, sometimes by intelligently controlled means in various parts of the universe. As you move around from one part of the universe to another, you encounter all sorts of values of time in certain given intervals. So what this is actually saying, this is a fundamental point, is that the density of time's passage is going up. Now, it doesn't appear that it's going up because we are inside the timeline. But there is a way that you can measure this as a spiritual being, because that's ultimately what this comes down to, is your spiritual progress. In other words, when I'm up here on the stage and my time starts going faster, you guys would see me as slow. But I would just start to see the room getting weird. But we're all on the earth going through this acceleration of time. The way you can measure it is this. You look at the duration between spiritually and emotionally provocative events in your life. That's how you measure that time is speeding up. How often are these crazy things happening to you that's kicking you to the next level of your spiritual development, whether you're ready for it or not? So when you see all these things happening with economic upheaval and you see all these spiritual events happening in your own life, some of which are very progressive, some of which are very destructive, depending on how much you're harmonizing with the energy of love, is what these teachings tell us, then you will be able to determine how well you're going along on this curriculum. Because the 2012 story is that we're all part of this divine creation. There's only one of us here. There's only one intelligent super universe creator. And we're only apparent separate beings. And when you tie all that stuff together, what you find is that we are all progressing back to that singular consciousness in the end, once again. It's all moving back in a direction where everybody gets to go home, everybody's a part of the one infinite creator. There's nothing in the universe outside the creator. That's what these esoteric teachings, like the ones we were talking about, tell you. So it's important to also understand that the time field can be used technologically, and there's many different ways to do that. I'm just going to talk a little bit about someone who created a hyperdimensional information transfer, sort of like broadband. He's done this with cell phone calls, where you can actually call someone and use the time field to transmit the information rather than electromagnetic energy. And what that means is that if you are way off in another solar system and I make a call to you, it's a perfect connection because the time field is outside of space. The time field travels instantaneously, much faster than light speed, and it travels right through concrete and anything. So this works through shielding and any type of normal thing that would cut off a cell phone. So this is a write-up of the study that he did where he actually transmitted an entire 8 gigabyte hard drive from one computer to another. And here's the source where they were doing this transfer in Danube University, and here's the destination where the information was being picked up. And here's another write-up about it online. So you can see now this is the distance between those 2 points. This information was lossless. They got everything to go through perfectly. So there's a bigger, wider view of it. So they're trying to succeed and get data transmission rates of 16 bits per second, stabilize the connection. This would make it possible for us to have broadband everywhere. So the point is, the SETI people are looking for radio waves, but why would you want to put a signal out on light speed when it's so slow? If we start listening to the time field, if we start listening to what the Russians call torsion fields, then you'll actually find out that there's all these messages going on in the universe. And the way you can listen to it is by tuning in within yourself in meditation, because it's already there. So this solves all the basic problems of quantum mechanics. This is another important point. When you take single particles and shoot them through these 2 slits, they actually form 3 lines, and what we're seeing is one particle breaks in half but then lands on all 3 of these places at the same time, and it's even been done where it will show up as 5 lines. Single particles strike in 5 different places. So obviously they're not particles. Obviously they're turning into a wave as they go through, kind of like this. So the way that we explain this actually is that subatomic particles are particles in our reality, but they're also spaced out in time in another reality, and they can flip-flop between the 2 realities. That's actually what's going on. When you see a wave, you're just seeing a particle smeared out in time. So if I smeared myself out in time the same way and I walked from one side to the other, then you would literally just see this kind of hazy shadow as I walked across the stage. That's what we're talking about here. That's what's going on with quantum mechanics. Now this has been proven to exist in objects larger than little electrons. This is a fullerene. You can see it's a molecule of 60 carbon atoms. And Zellinger in 1999 took these little 1 nanometer molecules, shot them through diffraction grating just like you saw, and got the interference pattern. So they take a single chunk, they shoot it through these 2 slits, and it breaks up into as many as 5 different lines. And it's a chunk, it's an object. So this starts to show you that there's something about physical matter that we haven't understood yet. There's something going on that allows matter to transmute. So here's the secret. It's the wave-particle duality. You see that physical matter is not so physical. And 1 nanometer is almost as big as DNA. So there could be quantum effects going on with our DNA as well. One of the ways you can see that is Kuznetsov, in which a sickened culture where there's a virus was energetically transmitted to a healthy culture of cells. just by allowing them to have optical contact with each other. So this is how, in many cases, diseases are transmitted. Now again, if you want to protect yourself from this kind of thing, the key is the positive attitude, because this is a consciousness field in which the disease will not be allowed in unless for some reason you're inviting it in to help you grow spiritually. That we're living in a giant illusion, which is managed by these higher dimensional beings, as I've been told, and I believe there's a lot of compelling evidence to show that. So again, time in its own domain is a three-dimensional reality, and you can look this up, reciprocal system, and find out more about that. The idea here, like Einstein's fabric, you have space-time and then time-space on the other side of the fabric. And when the fabric curls over, that's where you form this gateway, just like these particles curl over into time-space and become waves. So we already were talking about this. You can move around 3 dimensions of space, but 1 dimension of time is fixed and moves forward like a river. 3 dimensions of time to us and 1 dimension of space to us over there. You can move around in time. This is the dream plane, the astral plane. Distance traveled over there equals time travel over here. So what this means is this. If I popped into time-space right now in front of you, then I have 3 dimensions over there, which means you can't see me over here anymore, except maybe like a flickering light or something. But if I were to walk, if I simply walk, then as I travel through space, you guys are either going to be moving forward or backward in time. And if I stay still, then you guys are going to stay still. So it's like if you have one of those video recorders and you can back it up, back the tape up. If I walk backwards like this, then I'm going to see everybody going in reverse. If I walk forwards, it goes forward. Now this is actually how apparently it really works. But the reason why we don't normally see that in the dream plane or in an astral experience is that this plane is inhabited with lots of forms of life who look normal and can talk to you and have everything going on. So when you have an out-of-body experience, there's a way in which you can go through all this stuff that is important. Now, the entry and exit points are very important, because what this means is if you step in to the time field in one area and then you step out in another area, when you come back into our reality, that distance equals a time travel. So you have to go in and come out in the same place, or else you're going to have traveled in time in physical reality here. So this is some of the foundation that helps you understand the time field and where we're going with that. Is this another ordinary time in our history? And I'm going to propose that it's not, obviously. Now, these are some of the cataclysmic earth changes we've been seeing, the fires recently in Australia. Koalas can be dangerous. I know it sounds silly, but koalas actually can scratch at you and bite you and stuff. And so here you're seeing this heartwarming picture in which the fireman is able to water the koala and help. So these challenges bring us together. They help us help each other. And that's a very important point. Is there some sort of divine being that we can explain scientifically? Well, this starts to end that divide that we've had between science and religion for so long. I'm going to show you a little bit about crop circles. I'm going to move through this quickly because I lost about 15 minutes of time playing you the song, which I hadn't planned on, and I know exactly how many seconds I have per slide here. So we're just going to zip through this, but let's talk about the fact that crop circles have been around since 815 AD. The Archbishop of Lyon wrote this paper in which he was accusing people of believing in cloud ships from Magonia that were flattening circles into the crops. And the people were trying to steal the crops in order to make pagan fertility rituals. Why? Because they had this really amazing energy that you could feel when you went in there. So in the 12th century, we see Middle English terms, elf ringewort, meaning a ring of daisies caused by elves dancing. This also suggests crop circles are historically something that we've seen over and over again. I found this on Wikipedia. This is an actual illustration of the fairies dancing and mowing down some grass, because that's what they believed was causing these crop circles. Now in 1678, there was a story of a mowing devil, and this was actually published, and everybody got to read this, kind of like the newspaper of the time. The guy that came to mow the farmer's crop wanted too much money, and the farmer said, well, I'd rather have the devil mow my crops than you if you're going to ask me for that much money. That's ridiculous. Well, he wished he hadn't have said that, because he goes to bed that night, and the whole entire field lights up with white light. And then the next day, he goes out there, and there's this perfect circular shape in the crops, so neatly mowed that no mortal man could have done it. And this is a drawing of it. You can see they probably had 2 circles in that formation. Now, here's a guy, Dr. Robert Plot, who in the 1600s actually cataloged crop formations that came down on the earth. Now, this was in the dawn of science, so they made a lot of mistakes. One of the things that he made a mistake about was that he found the hip bone from a dinosaur called a megalosaurus. But only the top of the hip bone existed. The rest had been broken off in the rocks. So he flipped it upside down, and to him it didn't look like a hip bone. It looked like something else. Now, granted, that would be quite a boner. But very fascinating what he did, because he's drawing these images of what he thought were wind currents, but in so doing he documented crop formations like this spiral here and this pattern here, which is clearly not just a circle, and this one had a square in the middle. Now, his explanation is that, oh, there was a square current of wind. Well, unfortunately, modern attempts to debunk crop circles is not a whole lot better than this, really. Another thing that's important is that there was this funky smell when he looked at the soil underneath the crop circles, but they had a whitish, like they were cooked. But the taste was insipid, and that means that, God only knows why he wanted to taste this thing that smells like moldy socks. But he did, and it didn't taste bad. Now, this correlates perfectly with Dr. Gil Levengood's observations in the mid-1990s of exactly the same thing. Whitish soil that looks like it's been baked. So you're seeing a consistency in this crop circle pattern. Here's an eyewitness saying that he saw a whirlwind touch the ground, form a circle, producing a sharp-edged circle 3 or 4 meters in diameter in only a couple seconds. This next witness in 1972 heard a noise, but the air was still. That means there's no wind to create this crop circle. And right in front of his very eyes, he sees this wheat being pushed down with no wind, unfolding like the opening of a lady's fan, and hearing a high-pitched hum. So you have an eyewitness report of a circle like this. Now, in the early days, in the 70s, it was just single circles. Then it became these circles with 4 patterns around them. As time went on, you start to see more and more of this kind of shape, which is an indication of the pagan goddess, the pregnant belly. Does everybody see that? Now, here's a much more modern, recent crop circle in which they're really reinforcing the goddess archetype. So, symbolically, this appears to mean that the earth itself, the earth mother, is pregnant with a new reality. That's this 2012 thing we're heading into. You're going to see a lot more examples of this. You can see 3 distinct goddess images here, the head and the stomach, the head and the stomach. Again, the same pattern. This showed up on a Led Zeppelin CD box set. And if you consider this famous circle everybody's seen, there's 3 goddesses here. They're just all sharing the same stomach, which appears to be a description of first dimension, second dimension, third dimension, popping into the 4th dimension here, showing the earth being transformed again. Sometimes people have meditated on a circle and it will appear. This was somebody said, what if we saw a Mandelbrot set and the very next day this showed up in the crops, suggesting that there is an intelligent force behind all this. This crop circle showed up in 15 minutes, and surveyors have said it would take 2 to 3 days to plan it out. This one again showed up the same year, very beautiful formation, and you can see all the implicit geometry in here, suggesting some sort of training we're getting in a new science, which we're going to talk a little more about. So people started to realize, hey, this is talking about fractals and things like chaos theory. And then the Koch snowflake shows up. And so all the skeptics are like, no, that's not the snowflake. That's not a Koch snowflake at all. The crop circle makers are like, okay, well, fine, we'll throw you a snowflake. So they came back and did it again, put the snowflake in the middle, just to make the point. Now this is amazing. This complexity obviously was an army of hedgehogs running round and round in circles, or Doug and Dave, who are all drunk and they're stamping the patterns down in the crops. This is clearly not anything that we could have done. When you look at these crop formations and you pull little grains out, as all of you probably know, there's bends in the crops which show that they've been microwave heated. Large amounts of water underneath the crops disappear, which appears to be used to inhibit the burning of the crops, because normally if you microwave crops, they're going to catch on fire. So large amounts of underground water disappear, and you see these amazing shapes. This is my favorite one of all time so far. Look at the intense geometry of that mandala. And this is clearly a message that's being sent to us, but it's in the classic way that the ETs like to work, which is to preserve our free will. If you don't want to believe in this stuff, you don't have to. They're not landing on the White House lawn saying, here we are. We're getting little tidbits, and if you want to pay attention, you can realize, okay, there is something going on. Now, We had a 2012 glyph that came out in 2005. We now know that this was actually done by hoaxers. People went in there and found all these little blinking LED lights that were little machines in the crops. They didn't get the whole thing done the first time, so they had to come back and fix it. But if you look at the quality of the lines here, you see it's not very good. And then they actually tried to make this be like a Mayan description of how much time there was between when the crop came down in 2012, but this also was debunked online. So that appeared to be a crop circle telling us 2012 was imminent and that it was going to mean something, but it was debunked. But now we have another one, which we're going to see in a minute. Now, the crop circles are also giving us a message, and again, I want you to remember they've been showing up since at least 815 AD. The Archbishop of Lyon in France, the head guy at the time, because the church was more powerful than the state, the head guy issued this edict saying, don't take crops out of the crop circles. So the crop circles were a given. It wasn't even questioned, okay? Well, what are they telling us now? One of the things they seem to be telling us is that there are going to be genetic changes happening on the planet. Check this out. This looks like chromosomes breaking up. And chromosomes break up right before the cell's going to divide. Here's one that clearly shows what appears to be DNA. And then you see a triangle pattern of the same kind of DNA wave, but then look at this. Same year, just about a month apart, and it looks like it's telling us, hey, something really cool and really amazing is going to be happening to DNA. It's going to blossom in some way and turn into something new. Now here's another DNA formation which I really love. Can anybody not see that's DNA? It's pretty obvious. Now this one is even more cool because this looks like the Milky Way galaxy, which we now know is a spiral just like this. And then you're also seeing the DNA wave as if the galaxy itself is sending out waves that change our DNA. And you're going to see the proof in my presentation here, providing I make it on time, that all this is going to, well, we'll have enough time. I'm going to make sure of that. And these are also what are known as yods in Hebrew, and it indicates spiritual presence coming into manifest reality. So that's another indication symbolically that that's what we're being shown. Now, here comes the big finale as far as the crop circles, in my opinion. This came out this year. We get a very precise, no ambiguity description of what the planets are going to look like on December 21st, 2012. And here it is. Now, I want you to pay very special attention to the diameter of the sun, because it's going to get wider, and that's going to show us what they think, whoever's writing these crop circles since 815 AD or earlier, what they think is going to happen. Now here's the positions in the crops, and here's the actual positions of the planets. For some reason this guy wrote the 23rd, but the 21st is what we meant. But I used his original slides. His name is Red Collie. So you can see here Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, they're all in the right positions. Pluto is the only one that seems to be off, and the best I can figure is that it's because it would have cut through the line here and it wouldn't have looked right. And they wanted to make sure there was no ambiguity because clearly everything else is in alignment. Now, check this out. Farmer comes through, tries to destroy the formation, putting these long lines down. And the circle makers are like, oh, you don't like it? Well, here, how about we make it twice as big? So they come back, they draw another circle, and it appears to be this indication, all these little glyphs which might indicate different ET races that are coming to help us out through this transformation. But look at the diameter of the sun. It's gotten much larger, and as you can see, there's kind of an S-like pattern that's formed in the middle there, which is all very neatly laid out in the way the crops went down. Those three lines also ended up inadvertently synchronizing with these crop circle theorems written by Gerald Hawkins, in which harmonic geometry is showed up in the crop circles. If you measure the difference between the inner circle and the outer circle, when you draw these geometries in a circle, you get these basic musical ratios like the white keys on the piano. So again, now you can see how much wider the sun became. So this leads us into a discussion on interplanetary climate change, which, again, I've heard that there's a reporter from Time Magazine here in the audience. There's probably Black Ops people here in the audience too. I've spoken with several of them myself over the years. Some people do know that this is what's going on, that the entire solar system is going through climate change, not just the Earth, which means it cannot be attributed to SUVs. This is where we go from 2012 being a novelty that's in the realm of cranks and tinfoil hat wearing nonsense into something that is scientifically provable, in which correlations can be made between warming and activity on the different planets as you're going to see. So this is the smoking gun of 2012 scholarship. The solar activity, first of all, this is Solanke from all these different core samples of ice from the Antarctic and the Arctic Ocean and tree rings and all these things. They were able to get a big compilation of how much solar activity we've had in the last 11,000 years, and we're getting a huge spike. This is the biggest it's been in 8,000 years. You can see that right there. Now what we're seeing is that storms coming out of the sun, this was in 2005, used to take 2 to 3 hours. Now they're shooting through the solar system in 15 minutes, suggesting the energy between the planets is speeding up. Just like if you put a pot on the stove and you drop water in it when it's cold, the water's just going to sit there. But the hotter the pot is, the faster the little water is going to zoom around. Similarly, now the emissions from the sun are traveling through space faster and thus hitting us faster. So this is a new phenomenon. NASA is warning us of a space Katrina, that the sun could unleash radiation that could cause a great deal of trouble for the planet. And yet, what's happening now is that the sun's radiation is weakening. These conveyor belts are slowing down. And they, again, have no understanding of why this is happening. They say that we've never seen speeds so low. This has been going on since the late 19th century. This is the slowest it's ever been. Now you actually have mainstream media reports saying the sun is causing climate change. And that's the whole counter perspective to what Inconvenient Truth was saying with Al Gore. In other words, it's the sun that's doing this. And so if it's doing it to the Earth, it's obviously going to do it to the other planets. So again, now that we're seeing the sun's radiation speed go down, we're also seeing the solar wind slowing down since the beginning of the space age. It's the slowest it's ever been. And the bubble of magnetic energy around the sun has gotten 25% smaller very recently. Now, I want you to think about what could do that. If you increase pressure on a balloon from the outside, if you put it inside a little vacuum container and you turn up the air pressure, that balloon is going to get smaller and smaller until it bursts. But if you could measure it getting smaller and you see a 25% decrease, that would suggest that the sun is moving into a zone that has a higher pressure, which also means more energy is going to come in. So this appears to be what's happening. It's slowing down the solar wind, and you're also getting all this dust showing up. There was a 300% increase in dust coming into the solar system in just a year and a half after the year 2000, 300% more than what had come in during the entire 1990s. Mainstream media now talking about this. So this is a very recent, this is July of this past year. The sun is still going too slow. In fact, they had to alter the sunspot prediction. It normally should have been down here, and it should be going up now. But in fact, they had to slide the whole thing over. You can see that it's awkward because it's supposed to be a perfect wave like this, but now it's been slid over. And they don't know what the heck is going on. So there's one group of scientists who say they think the sunspots could completely disappear, that there's a trend line going down. Again, all this stuff is suggesting the sun is doing something we've never seen before, and it's affecting the planets, as we're going to go through. Now, up until recently, we didn't have anything on Mercury, and I'm not going to dwell on these because I know some people's heads start dropping back if I get too scientific, but this is important information because you're going to see how the whole solar system is undergoing change. When Messenger recently flew by in 2008, they found a substantial increase of pressure in the magnetic field that wasn't there before. And here's another, this is actually the mainstream media publication of that finding, just so you can see that I'm not making this up. Now, Venus had an increase in the night side green glow of 2,500% in the amount of brightness measured in less than 20 years from SRI International. So that's a very substantial change. These are caused by charged particles, which is coming in from the dust as a result of us moving into this zone of higher pressure in the galaxy that's pushing down on the sun's magnetic field. Same thing, particles are streaming into the atmosphere of Mars, and they're creating clouds that weren't there before and ozone that wasn't there before. Again, charged particles coming in that were not there before. Mars is heating up, the ice caps are melting. You can see the withering away in just 1 year, up to 50% erosion of features. They call this global warming on Mars in mainstream media. Jupiter is capturing all these particles in the orbit of Io, creating what's called a plasma torus. This, again, was not even there prior to 1974. And then between the 16-year period The density, this is a much faster version of how it goes around as Io orbits the planet. The density is increased by 200% in 16 years. And again, a lot of these studies have not been updated with more recent information because I think on the inside they're starting to realize something's going on. I've been lecturing about this stuff since the year 2000. So that's why we're not seeing any more recent information, is I think there's been a lid put on a lot of the stuff. But the scientists say, oh yeah, it's stronger than expected. They're not really that interested in like going out and telling the world. Now, the charged particles have gotten 50% denser, and they actually admitted this exceeded expectations. This means they're getting harder. That's because there's more of them coming in from the galaxy. They're thicker and denser. Jupiter's white ovals were believed to be responsible for ventilating heat in the planet, and Dr. Philip Marcus got on the cover of USA Today saying that this disappearance of 2 out of 3 ovals would cause an 18-degree global warming in Jupiter over the next decade, which is starting to happen. As you can see here, Jupiter is now having raging thunderstorms, global upheaval that they have not seen before. This is very recent. This was last year. And they're calling it recent turmoil on the planet. Here's where you can see the infrared signature of heat. This kind of brightness is not normal. That's new stuff that's happening very recently. They're calling it a dramatic planet-wide disturbance that is ongoing. The cause of the disturbance has yet to be explained. And so, again, they don't really know what's going on here, but they're believing that it's because of water vapor 300 times greater than what Galileo saw in 1995. It's not water vapor from inside the planet, it's the particles from outside in the galaxy. That's what they don't see yet. Charged particles are being captured by the moon of Io, causing the ionosphere, which is where all those particles are kept. In this beautiful color image, you can see the different colors they have here. That ionosphere has gotten 1,000% higher in just, 23 years. Very short period of time. The entire surface of the moon has gotten over 200% hotter, not just in one area, but the entire moon. It hasn't gotten any closer to the sun. Where's the heat coming from? Again, this is the time field. This is a non-physical energy that's charging up and heating up the planet. Europa has gotten much brighter than expected. Here's what they expected it was going to look like, and here's the brightness they actually got. Ganymede, 200% brighter, 1,000% increase in the density of the atmosphere. Saturn has grown with plasma Taurus, 1,000% denser. Aurora are showing up in the poles for the first time. Massive X-rays are showing up in 2004 that were not there before. Uranus was featureless in 1986. This is not infrared. Here you see an infrared image. This is normal. What we're looking at is these guys, which are not normal. And they're calling it huge storms, really big changes as of 1999. That was not there before. Seasonal brightness changes, which we do not understand why they're happening. Now you can see all the mess over here that's new. Look at this. So here's the original, okay? Look at all this stuff that's showing up here. In just a short time, this is happening right before our very eyes. Same thing is happening with Neptune. Why nobody has talked about this in mainstream media, I don't know, because it's all been released in mainstream sources. I'm the first person to have put this all together from NASA. There was a guy in Russia, Dr. Oleksii Dmitriev, who did it with Russian science, but then I upgraded it. Starting in 2004 is when I really got into all this. So between 96 and 2002, the entire planet of Neptune got 40% brighter in the near-infrared range. Look at how much an averaged-out view shows that it's changed. That's enormous. And here's a time-lapse photo of that. You can see 1989, 1996, 1998, and then 2002. Look at how it's growing. That's amazing stuff. Pluto, even though it's moving away from the sun, has a 300% increase in its atmospheric pressure, which they're actually calling global warming. So it's moving away from the sun, which means it should be getting what? Colder. But guess what's happening? It's getting warmer. Why again? 25% decrease in the size of the sun's magnetic field caused by pressure from the outside, firing in dust, firing in energy. Well, this dust and this energy is also going to be changing the Earth. And so this is part of why we're seeing all these changes happening right now. It's not just Earth changes caused by SUVs. There's something else going on. So I'm now going to show you some Earth changes that cannot be attributed to typical human pollution from global greenhouse gases. Earthquakes above 2.5 on the Richter scale I have a graph that shows it up to 1998. This trend is continuing. We just need to make a new graph. A 400% increase in earthquakes. These are the same volcanoes that have been studied since 1875. That's a 500% increase in the amount of volcanic activity. Continuous rise in sea level, continuous rise in surface temperature, continuous rise in tornado activity, continuous rise in natural disasters. This is the earthquake one. The only reason why that doesn't look like it's going up is because they included earthquakes smaller than 2.5, and they've built detection stations that are now better at detecting small earthquakes. So that's what's pushing that up. Economic losses are continually rising, inflation adjusted from severe weather. And these are the frequency of storms in the northern hemisphere, again, showing the same trend. The entire Pacific Ocean, the floor of the ocean is getting hotter in the period of just 16 years. Why would it be heating up from the bottom if this is the sun warming the water from the top? If you want to heat something up from the bottom, you heat the core of the earth. So the core of the earth is warming up. That's what's going on. Salts are increasing in the bottom of the ocean. When the astronauts go out into space, they see something called noctilucent clouds, and they've been reporting that these clouds have gotten much brighter. So just like you saw on Uranus and Neptune and on Saturn with that X-ray thing, the Earth and also Venus, remember that one, 22,500% increase in the night side green glow? Earth's doing the same thing. The astronauts are reporting this. In 1998, they actually found a new belt that has showed up in the Earth's magnetic field. It was never there before. And they disingenuously called it new belt. Why not make it just so simple and straightforward? But this is stuff that's only supposed to be seen between stars, interstellar matter. And yet here it is showing up on the surface of the Earth, in the Earth's magnetic field, not in between stars. It shouldn't have been there because the stuff in between stars is getting pushed into the solar system and charging up the solar system. Not surprisingly, we're seeing surprisingly rapid changes in the Earth's core, again suggesting internal heating and movement. The magnetic field is changing fast, which some people believe is going to cause this pole shift to occur. And of course, this is bringing us together. Can we unite to save the Earth? Well, this is the idea. Remember, in the beginning, I talked about how all of this manifest reality that we live in is part of a spiritual creation, which many, many ancient spiritual traditions say this, and now science is starting to back it up. And we're going to get into more and more about how this time field works and how it's related to consciousness and biology. So again, you cannot attribute all these changes in the Earth to greenhouse gas. It's not enough of an explanation because there's no SUVs on Jupiter or any of the other planets. So, again, here's the study showing galactic dust showing up much more than ever before. That seems to be one of the root causes. So if there's energy that's heating up the Earth from the inside, what is it doing to us? If this time field is related to consciousness and biology, then does it have an effect on us? Just like the crop circles were suggesting, that there was this biological change that's been happening. All right, so this gets into the study of consciousness science. Is consciousness a living, active, and transferable source of energy? Which is what my film, Convergence, is about. I'm an executive producer on a feature Hollywood film, and we have now attracted in some very major talent. And if I told you who this person was and what films this person's worked on, it would be quite stunning. Unfortunately, I'm in a non-disclosure agreement, but I'm thrilled that this guy found us and that we're going to be working together on this film. It's a major leap forward. So, even the mainstream media is starting to get into consciousness science. This was a particular article written on remote viewing, which probably everyone here is familiar with. Military using an advanced technique to take pieces of data from your subconscious and you just write it down without analyzing it, and you end up getting very elaborate information on a target, which could be a particular military installation. You start to find out what's there, even though you can't normally go in and look at it. Again, this was one of our older concept proofs for the album, or for the movie poster. Now, I want to start to talk about how the consciousness field, this time field, is the source of life. We have this current belief that life is like sourdough bread, right? And if you want to have sourdough bread, somebody's got to give you sourdough bread culture, or else you can't make it. So the belief is, well, if you want bacteria, you got to have other bacteria first. If you want life, there's got to be life first. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The answer is, it's the chicken and the egg that were designed intelligently, and they both exist simultaneously. So bacteria have been found all over the place, inside nuclear reactors in the Antarctic, After 10 million years of deep freeze, they've been revived. They can photosynthesize in practically pitch darkness. They can thrive on nuclear radiation, infrared light. They've been found miles beneath the floor of the ocean. How did they get down there? How is this bacteria forming several miles underneath the Earth's crust? If bacteria is just this thing that needs other bacteria to grow, how does it form inside a nuclear reactor? Where did it come from? Did they all originate from other living bacteria? We're going to say no. This is Dr. Chandra Wickramasinghe, who talks about the theory of panspermia, the idea that biological material is in comets. This has been proven. We've sent space probes up to comets, sampled some of their dust, and found all the precursors of biological life in the comets. There's billions of comets just in our solar system, so he believes that life may have been put here by the comets. Well, that's kind of in the right direction. Now, here's one of the co-discoverers of the DNA molecule. This is Dr. Francis Crick. And he proved that DNA is way too complicated to have evolved by a random process. It's as if the entire Encyclopedia Britannica fell out of the sky one word at a time, and it all lined up perfectly to make the encyclopedia. It's impossible. Then he discovered more recently, nobody ever talks about this, that 99.9% of all the dust in the galaxy, when you analyze the radio waves from it, it looks exactly the same as bacteria would if they're sitting in space, which is Howard Hughes' worst nightmare. Space could be filled with germs. Another mainstream media talking about this same kind of study. Again, another study recently found space dust in another solar system around the star known as HR 4795A. They saw, wow, it looks just like life here. So they're starting to tell you now and more, life seems to show up wherever it can. Now, is there some sort of energy? Is there a consciousness energy, this thing that's powering time and life? It's the source of all creation, basically. If you get an exposure to higher amounts of this energy, is it going to speed up the rate of time in the cells? In other words, when you go into outer space, is the time field moving faster? Does the Earth's atmosphere slow down time for us? It appears that that's what's happening. But there's some sort of biologically active energy that you get when you go out into space that you don't normally see. So check this out. First of all, we have Dr. Edgar Mitchell and other astronauts reporting this space euphoria. They go out into the space, in the spaceships, and their consciousness is suddenly enhanced. And they have this feeling as if an intense awareness that the Earth, with its humans, other animal species and systems, were all part of a synergistic whole, a sense of interconnected euphoria. And many astronauts have reported this. Now, in terms of practical scientific studies, the Chinese have been sending seeds up into space, and then when they bring the seeds back down and they plant them, they're getting a much, much higher growth in how these seeds are being formed into living material. So here's how this works. Anybody want to see some pictures? Yeah. All right, let's do it. Bang. That's a typical pumpkin seed after you've flown into space. That's all you have to do. It's easy. Right? I mean, we could be totally transforming agriculture just by doing this one trick. Let's look at a melon called a bitter gao, which tastes horrible, but I mean, Chinese really like that stuff. That's not a typical bitter gao. It would be about that long. This one was just put into space. That's all they did. And these are your little hot peppers about this big. You put them into space and they get to be enormous in size. So again, here's the idea. If you increase the flow of the time field into life, that life is going to be vitalized and enhanced. Just like pyramids ultimately, we can demonstrate that pyramids are sending that vitality into whoever is lying in the pyramid, like in the Great Pyramid. This is the ancient idea of initiation, where it uplevels your health, it uplevels your vibration, and it uplevels your spiritual realization at the same time. Now, can we find the source of all life in an energy wave? In other words, right now in this room, is there satellite TV? Think about it. If you put up a little dish and you want dish TV, which would be very rude and I'd probably make fun of you in the audience, but if you make your little dish TV, you could have satellite TV in the room now. Is there cell phone calls going on in the room right now? Is there radio stations going through the room right now? Is there broadcast television? Well, up until they put the mind control device on your television, which everybody's so worried about, but right now, yes, there is. There's broadcast television. So, what if the reason why that DNA can't occur randomly, like the Encyclopedia Britannica falling one word at a time out of the sky, what if the reason why DNA can't occur randomly is that it starts as a wave that's all around us, and then that wave will grab whatever molecules it can to create life out of those little molecules? That's what we're actually talking about. That's what we're dealing with here. That the life originates from the field. Now, I'm going to show you a really compelling piece of information from Dr. James Strick. This is published with Harvard University Press. His book is called Sparks of Life, exposing a major scientific conspiracy that was going on throughout the 19th century. Some people were arguing in favor of Darwinian evolution through random mutation, like Louis Pasteur, while other scientists were arguing for spontaneous generation, in which life arises from material that was not alive. Now again, they hadn't made up their minds yet. This is the 1800s. So it wasn't like everybody had decided that it was only going to be one way. Many of these scientists were coming up with hardcore proof in the laboratory for spontaneous generation. Pasteur himself, hence pasteurized milk, because you kill the bacteria in the milk, that's where it came from, had cases where life originated from non-living material. So they stuffed the whole thing down, made it into a big conspiracy, big cover-up, but you can't just dismiss all this stuff. This is what Strick's book is talking about. They've completely rewritten history in favor of the Darwinian model of evolution. Now this is a big mouthful. It's on orgone.org, but what we've got here is a study in which you're taking ordinary beach sand and you heat it up with a Bunsen burner so that it's white hot, and that kills any form of life that would normally ever be found in sand. Again, you can have bacteria that thrive in nuclear reactors and volcanoes, but all the life that would normally ever be found in sand is killed when you get above 1,000 degrees Celsius, which is what they put it up to here. Then what you're seeing happen is that the sand is sterilized and then put into a sterile tube with distilled water in it. That's all you've got. Sterile water, sterile sand in a sterile environment of vacuum. So there's no way that any critters could get inside. Then, once you've heated up the sand, after 3 or 4 days, this scum forms on the top of the water, which you would normally think of as just silicon. But it's not just silicon. It's got little critters in it, and we can find them when we look at it under the microscope. Here's an example. Where did his DNA come from? This came out of sterilized sand and sterile water. This is a single leaf off of a little sea fan kind of thing. Let's check out that detail up close, because you can't really see it here. Very obviously biological. Came out of nowhere. Here's something that looks like a little red blood cell, came out of nowhere. Here's what looks like a white blood cell, again, showed up magically in the water. This little guy trips me out the most. Check him out. He's got a little defense system, a little head, a little mouth here. His DNA came right out of the energy waves in space. And the energy waves in space, when it has sand and water that's sterilized, it says, oh great, I can make life. Let's spin all these molecules together and start some life going. That's how it really works. It's just that our science hasn't even put this together yet. Now, just to show you how far this really goes, as of February 15th, this is less than 2 weeks ago, National Geographic came out with a new study in which they found identical creatures in the ocean at the North Pole and the South Pole. Nobody can explain how they got there. Here's a little write-up. It's from the International Census of Marine Life. They found, up until now, 235 different identical species at both poles. Finding so many species inhabiting both poles startled the scientists. They have no way to explain, because you don't see them anywhere else. These are brand new species we've never found anywhere else. They're only at the poles. They've found whales, worms, and crustaceans. And exactly where these species came from and how they ended up a world apart with comparatively warm oceans in between remains a mystery. Anybody want to see some of these guys? All right, here we go. Very strange creature with these mucus-like fans coming off. That can't be mistaken. I mean, that's a brand new species, and yet you see them at both poles. Here's another funny-looking creature. And here we go with another one. This is only seen at the poles, but they're at both poles. And this little guy has his own little defense system here. Little shrimp, little crustacean. So again, the Earth is spontaneously generating these little critters, just like you saw with the beach sand, but only when the energy fields of the poles are right to create that life. This is the very first time I've ever debuted this information anywhere. So this is brand new stuff. Now, if life is originating from a field that takes whatever the constituent molecules are in a given area and spirals them together to make something alive, then what's happening to us? Does this system in which you can take ordinary beach sand and get critters to grow, in which species of complex life are showing up at the poles that you don't see anywhere else, then what does it mean about us? And what does it mean about evolution? In other words, can you get one species to turn into another this way? Is the DNA molecule like a jigsaw puzzle that only has one solution, or can you break up the pieces and have more than one answer to the puzzle that makes more than one species? That's exactly what we see. So the first way we look at this is Dr. John Kearns. And this is one that Dr. Bruce Lipton talks about all the time. You take bacteria that cannot eat lactose, and you put them in an environment where all they have is lactose. What do you think would happen to them? They'd die. Do they die? No. They spontaneously evolve new mouth parts that will digest lactose. Again, this is a Harvard scientist here. This is not fringe. This Italian lizard showed a remarkable evolution because he was transferred 5 adult pairs from his home island, his or her home island in the South Adriatic Sea, moved from a desert island where they were eating insects to a vegetation island in which they had to eat plants. Now, the scientists did this. They did this transfer in 1971. They hung out for a while. They came back in summer of 2004, 2005, and 2006. And I'm going to make a dramatic pause while I take a sip of water. So what do you think happened to these lizards? They go from a desert island to a vegetating island. Do you think that maybe they would have had some sort of evolution in a very short period of time to enable them to eat vegetation? That's exactly what happened. Remember that movie Super Size Me? Who saw that? Remember the guy towards the end? He actually didn't get so sick when he was eating McDonald's every day. He starts to get better, right? His body started to evolve to the McDonald's. Now, I'm not saying go out and eat McDonald's, but this is how it works. They captured the same lizards. They measured them for the size of their snouts, the head, the body mass. They took DNA from the tails to confirm they were genetically identical and found striking differences in the size and shape of the head, an increase in the strength of their bite, and they even found new structures in the digestive system that never existed in these lizards before. These are called cecal valves, and what they do is they create a pocket of fermentation that allows them to digest plant material. Well, normally they don't have this. They spontaneously evolved this in just 36 years. It's astonishing. So you can see here some different versions of this lizard that we find throughout the world. You can see how much bigger the head can be from one species to another. So the head got larger, and they grew new structures in the digestive tract. Their bite got stronger. All these things happened. As they became vegetarian, they also stopped this instinctive behavior of defending their territory, which I also find very interesting. So we have yet another lizard study that shows the same thing. This one came out even more recently than that one. This was in November of last year. Now, this predator lizard was introduced. He obviously travels on the ground to this species on a particular island. They had never had to encounter this predator before. And what this study is showing us is that these little guys who used to be on the ground had to basically take up into the trees, like you see here, in order to be able to avoid these predators eating them. And what happened was that their legs, as you see in the original study, natural selection dramatically changed direction for a very short time, favoring first longer legs and then shorter hind legs, which means they actually evolved dynamically. Their legs got longer, which was the first step so they could run faster away from the other lizard. You got longer legs, you got a bigger stride. But then when they had to take up into the trees because the lizards were still killing them, their legs actually got shorter than they were before so that they could cling to the branches better. And this happened, as it says here, in a very short period of time, within months as the needs of the population change. So again, our DNA is intelligently interfacing with our reality and giving us feedback about what's going on to adapt to what's going on. So with all these earth changes and economic changes that are happening to us, we are also being guided through an evolution. This is not just lizards, this is humanity. And we are spiritually evolving, because this doesn't just stop with biological things like digestive system. It's the same reason why fewer people are getting cancer from cell phones now than before, right? We're evolving to be able to take a cell phone call and not have it damage us as much as it was before. So another thing like this is this monster fish that they found in the Congo wasn't there before. They're calling it evolution on steroids. The fish has grown into unbelievable size that didn't happen before. This also solves that mystery about goldfish. What happens if you put a goldfish in a little bitty bowl? He stays small, right? You increase the size of his bowl, even if he's much older, then what happens to him? He starts getting larger. And then what do the scientists say? They say, oh, it's because he's banging up against the side of the bowl. Now he has more room to move around so his body can grow bigger. It's because his DNA has this energy field that sizes out the space that he's in and makes his body coded for the right size for the tank. That's what's really happening there. Even orangutans are starting to show behavior that they haven't seen before. They've never seen an orangutan swim. Now they're swimming. And they're actually learning how to fish with spears. They're starting to hit fish with a stick in the water and knock the fish out so they can catch it easier. And they're learning to go in and grab fish out of fishermen's nets and all the stuff they couldn't do before. So they're thinking of this as like a sign of rapid evolution. Now, could a species be transformed energetically? Is this what's actually happening to us? Are we now going through a transformation? In other words, people that have these kind of psychic abilities that I've demonstrated, which you can read more about on my website, divinecosmos.com, I'm not really talking about it today. Lots of people are developing these things. I'm not the only one. Many, many people are. And you've seen some evidence of that here throughout the course of the week. So, is there a reason why these higher potentials are being activated within our own consciousness? Is it some sort of energy coming into the solar system, changing the solar system, not just in terms of the brightness and the heat, but also the speed of the time field, right? That time is actually speeding up, but because we're in time, we don't notice it except as an increase in how often these emotionally provocative events are happening that keep pushing us forward on our evolutionary path. Well, can we have some proof that DNA could be transformed? We actually do. This is Tizian Conchazin, and what he does is he takes a duck here, and then he zaps it with a microwave generator. This is not enough to kill the duck. It's enough to zap his DNA and send the energy through these little funnels and little copper pipes into another room over here. And here's where you have a pregnant chicken. Now, he measured how many eggs were in the chicken's womb. Here you have the typical physiology of the duck. Notice the longer beak. Notice the shape of the head, where the position of the eye is. Chicken's eye is more like down here, as you can see in the next shot. Shorter beak, shorter neck. No webbing between the feet like you see here. There's webbing. Now, of course, this is not what happened. These are not little ducks that came out of this chicken. I just so happened to find this particular image to kind of suggest what might be going on here. Here's the actual image, the first one I was able to find that was genuine, of duck hens. These little hybrid creatures came out that had webbing between their toes and actually had heads that in many cases were shaped more like a duck with a longer beak, and we have a better image of that. I just found this week. I've been talking about this for years, and I finally found some pictures. And this does not look like a chicken at all. And so here's the actual summary of what he found. Total of 500 duck eggs were zapped, 480 of them hatched. 80% of the eggs came out with a flat duck-shaped head. 90% had a shift in the position of the eyes, more like what a duck would have than a chicken. 25% had webbing appearing between their toes. So again, you take the energy of the duck, you send it into the chicken, and you get duck hen creatures for babies. Now, has anybody ever thought about what the heck happened with a duck-billed platypus? Well, now we might have the answer. Maybe there was a group of ducks and a group of moles that were getting together, just having their little powwow, and they got struck by lightning. It synergized the DNA in a large number, for whatever reason, and their offspring have this very strange marsupial thing where they lay eggs, but they're a mammal and they have this beak. There's no other creature like that. That's what could happen as a result of DNA melding like this. Now, it gets even more interesting when we talk about Dr. Peter Garriev, because here he's got eggs that are laid by a frog, and he zaps them with this non-burning laser beam that he shoots through the eggs of a salamander. And what do you think happened to the frog eggs when they're zapped by the energy from the salamander and they're in sealed containers? What do you think happened? You get a complete metamorphosis. The DNA in the frog embryo completely shifts its whole identity from being frog DNA to being salamander DNA. These little guys grow to adulthood, they can breed with our salamanders, and there is no evidence of them ever having come from a frog. This is what's happening with evolution. As species on the planet massively change from one major era in society to another, society of their time, and we're having a social change again now. So how could this be happening? Could this be energy fields from the galaxy? Well, let's take a look. Here you have the original study from James Rope and David Sepkoski from University of Chicago showing a 26 million year cycle. This is where new species spontaneously show up in the fossil record. They did this with all these marine fossils, 3,600 different genres of marine fossils. This is the dinosaur fall, 65 million years ago. You can see there's been 2 more since then. Now, another important point here is these are not all cataclysms. Some of these changes happen with the Earth being fine. There's no asteroids, there's no nuclear winter kind of thing with volcanoes going off. The Earth simply decides to change. But why is it happening in even cycles of time? That suggests that there is some sort of energetic change that is being pushed. It's pushing this change through for everyone on the planet. Now, another scientist, Dr. Robert Rode, and again you can see this is mainstream media stuff here, went all the way back to 542 million years ago, the dawn of life on Earth, and found that in every 62 million years you get the same thing, these sudden dramatic changes in the species on the Earth. You can see how, when it goes back to the time when this started 250 million years ago, that the cycle pretty much stops, or it's not as strong as it was. It's still kind of there, but it's a little bit out of phase because now this cycle has taken hold. So what I'm literally saying is this is not some sort of planet in the galaxy that's orbiting around, because there'd only be 4 orbits of the entire galaxy for this to be able to be 62 million years long. The galaxy is only about 225 million years long in its whole orbit. So this is like fields of energy expanding from the center of the galaxy like ripples on a pond, taking even lengths of time to go through the solar systems all throughout the galaxy, promoting the evolution of life on those planets. And you have a fossil record showing that there is an energetic reshuffling of DNA on our planet caused by galactic energy fields, and I have other proof, not in this presentation, showing you where those galactic energy fields are, because we just don't have enough time. It's only 2 hours. But in longer presentations, I actually show you where the galactic energy fields are, how they've been measured in the microwave spectrum, and all that stuff. So this is what we're saying is responsible. The same energy that's transforming the solar system right now. So just like the frog egg goes to the salamander egg and charges up the salamander's egg so that it changes from the salamander into the frog or vice versa. It goes through the salamander, charges up the frog egg, and you can do it both ways. What we're seeing is that the galaxy has a script. And it has a script that's why you're seeing those different forms of life appearing on both poles of the Earth that you don't see anywhere else. That's the Earth's program. The Earth helped design it as an intelligent being. The sun helped design it, because when you get into this consciousness science, everything's conscious. It's not just, like just when you fly those seeds out into space, they're growing faster. There's some kind of energy out there. You're seeing the Earth programming life at the poles, both poles the same way. You're seeing evolution occurring in systematic leaps throughout time, again showing the same phenomena. So how do we apply this to human beings? We actually have scientific evidence to show that it's already happening to us, that we as human beings are already being affected and pushed through the next major evolutionary leap by this energy. This is John Hawks from University of Wisconsin studying rapid evolution in human beings. And he's now shown that evolution is moving 100 times faster in the last 5,000 years. 100 times, that's huge. the last 40,000 years in general for human evolution have been a time of supercharged evolutionary change. Now this is what's really amazing. 3000 BC, you got Sumerian civilization, you got ancient Egypt, you got these old civilizations. Do you normally think of these civilizations as being like the Neanderthals? No. They wrote ancient scripts. There's hieroglyphics in the pyramids you can read. There's Sumerian cuneiform that you can read. Seems like they were primitive, but they had, in some cases, appear to have running water. They had these wonderful pyramids they were making. Well, they are more different from us than they are from Neanderthals. The Neanderthals are more similar to the people in 3000 BC than they are to us. That shows you how much that 100 times faster improvement in evolution has occurred in the last 5,000 years. We are really changing. We don't see it because we're all here now. But it's just like where we were talking about that blue-eyed humans didn't show up prior to 10,000 years ago. That's part of the same process. So again, here's a mainstream media link that you can see where I got that from, so I'm not making this up. And here's another link from the mainstream media talking about 100 times increase in the last 5,000 years, again, showing you this was December 2007. And we're also seeing our IQs going up, and this is in all these countries throughout the world, whether they're literate or not. An average of 3 points of IQ per decade. Over 20 different countries were studied, and it's gone on for over 100 years. Every 10 years, our IQ is going up by 3 points, which means they have to keep changing the IQ test to measure how much is average. Because if you have a 100 IQ, that means you're average. So you have to be smarter and smarter now to get a 100 IQ because of how much the IQ is going up, 3 points per decade. So over 100 years, that's a 30-point jump in IQ. That's huge. We don't realize it because we're enjoying the benefits of being smarter with the internet and with all the things we can read. The fact that one copy of the Sunday New York Times has as much information as somebody in the Middle Ages was exposed to for an entire year. We're just processing more and more. We don't notice it, but we are getting smarter. And they call this a cultural renaissance, that it's actually creating very substantial changes in our society. So here's another study that shows that the overall amount of people that are reporting themselves being happy has gone up between 81 and 2007. 45 out of 52 countries reported a substantial increase in the overall happiness that they felt. That's also a good sign because it shows, again, this energy is helping us get clearer in our lives and helping us be more happy and vibrant. Another thing that's interesting is that at the same time, the gap between the people who are happy and not so happy has changed. In other words, there's fewer people who are a lot less happy and there's fewer people who are a lot more happy. This energy is stabilizing all of us into a more similar level of overall happiness based on these surveys. And they call it an interesting finding because there's increasing gaps in income, consumption, and leisure time, which can't be explained. They don't know why this is happening. But again, that's a consciousness field kind of effect that's causing this. Now, if you go all the way back into the 1950s, remember the stuff at the beginning I was talking about with the time field and W.B. Smith? And I told you that he was getting it on a radio telegraph, and they tell him, go look in the backyard, and then there's a UFO sitting in the backyard. And he's telling us that, remember what I said before? That as you travel through the galaxy, you encounter all different values of time in given intervals. Now, you might not normally notice that if you're on the planet, because as I said, we're all speeding up at the same time, so everything appears the same. And this doesn't mean that the planet is literally moving faster. If that was happening, then you'd obviously be able to measure it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the quantum processes in atoms and molecules are speeding up. And the speed of our vibrational field. If your mind is actually occurring in an energetic field, if your mind is using this energetic field to think, and if the speed of the field goes up, then what does that mean about how fast you're going to be able to process information, thus how intelligent you are? It's going to go up. So as the consciousness field rises, and again, because it's only a 2-hour presentation, I have an array of mind-blowing stuff that shows you that the consciousness field is what's going on in the mind. Just to quote one for the sake of argument, Dr. John Lorber studied cases of people that have a rare condition called hydroencephaly, in which before they started to use shunts to drain out the fluid, people's brain fills up with water inside, and it pushes the entire brain to the edge of the skull so that it's down to the size of a slice of bologna. Now, what do you think happens to people when their brain gets smushed and there's nothing left inside but water? Well, most of them end up being severely retarded or die. But he found consistently that about 15% of the people that had this happen to them didn't experience any losses in their cognitive function at all. There was one guy in particular who graduated from Cambridge University with a degree in mathematics. For all intents and purposes, his brain was effectively gone. So this shows us that the brain is more like a relay station, just like I said with the out-of-body experience when you have a near-death. The brain is dead, there's no electrical activity, but your consciousness continues functioning, showing that your consciousness is outside the brain. Now, another area that this gets into, which I didn't have time to give you slides for here, is how physical matter exists at a certain particular frequency. And that's a vibrational frequency that we see is happening the same way all along. What if the frequency of physical matter went up? Could this start to explain things like the Bermuda Triangle, in which planes fly through this area of space on the Earth's surface, and they're seen to disappear? There's no flotsam or oil slicks or any type of junk on the water. They're talking to the tower 1 minute, and the next minute they're gone. There was another very interesting case of a National Airlines 727 airliner. This was, again, I believe, in 1971. They're flying into Miami Airport through the Bermuda Triangle, and 1 minute they're talking to the tower and everything's fine. The next minute the tower is screaming, "Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? What happened?" Right in the middle of a sentence. They couldn't figure out what's going on. They said, "What are you talking about? We're fine." The tower said, "No, you guys disappeared off the radar for 10 minutes. You were gone. You didn't exist for 10 minutes, and then you came back." The plane lands, and they found that everybody's watch on the clock, all the clocks were 10 minutes slow. They just jumped through 10 minutes of time like it didn't even exist. And I have a whole body of amazing data like that we can talk about in other conversations where we have more time. Oops. So, here's the second or the third book, I believe, written by George Hunt Williamson, which is going to go into detail on these prophecies that were given to show us what's happening to us now. Now, note the date. It's 1959 is when this came out, even though the experiments started to get this information in 1952. In 1952, we were told that our planet and entire solar system was entering the outer fringes of a great cosmic cloud or area of intense cosmic ray activity. As we enter the fringes of this field of energy, we begin experiencing strange weather, melting polar ice caps, earthquakes, increase in cosmic ray bombardment, and effects on radio broadcasting. Governments were deeply concerned and set up special projects to study radiation and the effects on organic life. Now, a few months later, he says, he goes on, he believes that the cosmic ray increases were directly attributable to this thing. We now know that's been debunked, that's not true. But the fact that too many electrons are coming in and all these cosmic rays bombarding from outside the solar system tends to support the idea that, as the original prophecies said, this is 1950s channeling, which was validated as very accurate for other reasons. You know, they actually gave us two forms of working technology, the caduceus coil, which created energy going out that you can't measure, and they also created a torsion field or a time field detector. You stretch a piece of monofilament fishing line to the point where it's about to break, and then when you take it through an area where the time field changes, the strength of that fishing line changes and it makes a needle wiggle. So what's actually happening is the molecules, because the speed of the vibration of the molecules is changing, it changes the length of the string, which makes the needle wag. So that's one of the technologies that was given from this contact to use to be able to detect torsion fields, as they're called. So it supports the idea that our entire solar system, as we were told in 1952, is entering a new possibility area in the universe. And it will change every aspect of our life: economics, religion, education, politics, science, social life, medicine, eating habits. Virtually everything will be influenced and for the better. The Bible contains many references that are obviously connected with this cause and effect of the vibratory rate. Again, I'm not trying to push Christianity on you here, but we have a valuable historical document from 2,000 years ago, which, based on the new information that we have, can be reinterpreted. And some of the things that it says will now make more sense than it did before. So it is written, the first man, Adam, was made a living soul. The last Adam was made into a quickening spirit. Well, what the heck is that? We're going to find out. The first man is of the earth, earthy. The second man is the Lord from heaven. As we have borne the image of the earthy, we shall also bear the image of the heavenly. Now this I say, brothers and sisters, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, neither will corruption inherit that which is incorruptible. I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound. Now what do you think the trumpet is? It's like a vibration, right? Trumpet makes a sound. A sound is a vibration. The vibration will increase. It's like they're analogizing the change in the solar system to this trumpet sounding, rising the vibration in the solar system. For the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised incorruptible. This seems to indicate, if we read the other sources of esoteric material, such as this 1950s channeling, they say that this is misinterpreted by fundamentalist Christians where they see people getting up out of coffins, out of the ground. What it actually means is that like the afterlife plane and the physical plane blend together so that everybody comes together. We shall be changed. The corruptible must put on incorruption. The mortal must put on immortality. Well, you know, there's a lot of people out there now who are trying to debunk that anything happened in biblical times, that the whole thing was made up. In fact, there's movies out there on the internet that are trying to portray this that are very popular. All of the best intuitive sources that I've seen say that the historical Jesus did exist and that these prophecies are actually in fact coming true. Because look, if it says in the 1950s that we're moving into this zone of energy in the solar system that's going to change the consciousness of people on Earth, and that it's going to do interplanetary climate change, and then we're seeing the interplanetary climate change, that's a very compelling piece of evidence showing us that that's really happening. If they predict it before and then it comes true, then we have an accurate prophecy. We're now out of the realm of speculation and superstition. And now we're looking at the Bible, and the Bible is saying the same thing. Again, the idea here is the galaxy is promoting evolution. The galaxy is actually stimulating our DNA, stimulating our consciousness to take us to the next level. And you guys have been seeing all this UFO information through the whole week, and I don't really talk about UFOs too much in this presentation. But one of the things that I'd like to remind you is this testimony of Sergeant Clifford Stone, who said that during the course of his work, where he, for secret government purposes, was retrieving crashed alien discs, that they briefed him on 57 different varieties of extraterrestrial. And of those 57 different varieties, all of them looked human in one way or another. There were subtle variances. The heights range from 1.5 feet tall to 15 feet tall. You get variances in skin color. In fact, the typical gray that everybody sees is about the most unlike us of any of them. Many of them look much more like us than you would ever imagine. In fact, there's some where the only difference is the color of skin. You get weird colors of skin that you wouldn't normally see here. There's a peach color, there's a pink color, there's a green color, there's an orange color. But other than that, there's a lot of similarity. And I've actually spoken with Sergeant Clifford Stone. I spoke with Henry Deacon, another Black Ops whistleblower, who was telling me the same kind of information. But in this case, he was talking about 40 some odd groups that he was personally involved with in the course of his work. And he's also given me a lot of information that makes me believe that he's coming from truth. So, we look for new heavens and a new earth wherein there will be righteousness. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered nor come into mind. As the new heavens and the new earth which I shall make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. There shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Well, that's happening in the solar system, isn't it? That could be a prophecy right there of interplanetary climate change. Signs in the stars and in the moon. What would be happening in the moon? Well, normally they say, oh, the moon turns to blood. But this is a lot more than just that. Sun, moon, and stars. Upon the earth there is the distress of nations. Everyone is perplexed. The sea and the waves are roaring. Men's hearts are failing them because they're so afraid. They're worried about the things that are going to be happening on the earth. They're fearing for the future. For the powers of the heavens will be shaking. Then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud. What do you think cloud could have been mistranslated as in the original text? Could be anything. Could be UFO, right? It could be that all this stuff that we're seeing in the skies right now are people Not just scary-looking creatures that are out there to have a cosmic human barbecue party and kill and eat everybody, which is what many scary movies would like you to believe. But look at all the UFO sightings that have taken place over nuclear missile installations. This is something that happened at Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project conference. And he's got these people there, and I was there in 2001. I was at the conference. I got to interview them myself, reporting that the nuclear missiles would power down when the UFOs were there and that they were radioactively inert. They were non-threatening. So if that's true, then what does that mean for us? It means that we no longer have to be stuck in this idea that nobody is taking care of us. It means that someone does care. Someone is out there. Someone is watching over and shepherding this process. You've probably all heard of the Fatima prophecies, early 1900s. 3 little girls say that they're being contacted by the Virgin Mary. And they look up at the sun and they see what looks like a disc shape that comes down and hits the earth. There were miracles happening in the course of these events, which ended up attracting like 40,000 people. And the miracles included the fact that people were sopping wet, and then all of a sudden everybody was dry. Now, if that was happening in today's age, it would be the de facto equivalent of disclosure. But the important part is that here you have a UFO that's identifying itself as the Virgin Mother for Catholic people, giving them the fulfillment of Catholic prophecy, saying, if you don't change your ways, then bad things are going to happen. So here we have a connection between the single word coming in a cloud with the Fatima prophecies, showing us the possibility that that's what the word was translated into, but it means something else, in which case the prophecy is already being fulfilled, because the Virgin Mother, of course, being the mother of Jesus. So, when these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads, for redemption draws near. Now, what we're trying to say here is, first of all, you're looking at an energetic process. This is not something where people in Podunk, 144,000, rise up into the air because Jesus came on a cloud and says, oh, you guys got my teachings right, everybody else, but you guys are good. No, come on. That's not what this is about. Every ancient spiritual tradition talks about the coming of a golden age. And now you're seeing a far more robust, complex, scientifically interwoven case showing you crop circles that have been going on since 815 AD, telling us that 2012 is a significant date. We're seeing interplanetary climate change, which is the fulfillment of this prophecy from the 1950s, which we're seeing the planets themselves charging up, becoming brighter, hotter, and more magnetic, an energetic change occurring throughout the entire solar system. When you have the salamander eggs zapped by a laser going into the frog eggs, you need a source of energy, in this case a laser beam, to activate the DNA in the frog eggs to make them change into a salamander. The equivalent energetic activation that's happening now is this movement into a new zone of energy in the galaxy, which is why Benjamin Franklin was the guy who invented a closed stove, where you have a fire where there's burners on top, and you heat up the burners rather than just cooking over an open fire. Think about that. As little as 300 some odd years ago, we were cooking over open fire. We didn't have any of this technology. We take it for granted now because of all the conveniences we have, laptops and all these things. But look at how fast our society has changed. And now we're progressing less technologically because basically we've had internet, we've had computers since the 80s in some form or another. But what's now happening is more of this cultural renaissance that John Hawkes is talking about. You see scientific evidence that the human life form is evolving 100 times faster in the last 500 years. So as we're moving through this zone of energy, it's charging up the planets, and it's heading us into something. Now, all of this material gets up to the point where you can only go so far with the Bible. Here's about as far as the Bible will take you. But when you go into other sources of intuitive data, like this stuff from the 1950s and another source called the Law of One series, which is some intuitively derived material from the early 1980s. I found the Law of One material in 1996, and it was breathtaking, the scope and the complexity of all the information that it was giving. In fact, much of what I've come up with in this talk was me reading all this stuff in 1996 and saying basically, okay, I think this is true, but I can't believe that it's true unless I can find the spiritual and scientific proof to validate it for me so that I'm able to be comfortable with the idea that this is really going on. And that search has been going on since 1996 at least. And you're seeing now the fruits of what that's leading to for me. So, what I would like to do is to take a little bit of time now, and I want to help give you an actual experience of the consciousness field. Normally what would happen is I delay this until the second talk if I have 2 talks, but I want to do it now because you guys have been bombarded with a lot of information, I understand that. But doing this will enable me to take this information and kind of seed it into your soul. Now, it's actually 5:45 right now, so if anybody has a pressing commitment, but they're telling me I have 18 minutes remaining, so we're given a little grace period, a little extension. I guess that means I'm doing well. Does everybody think I'm doing well? Thank you. Very good. So what I'd like to do, if it's okay with you, this is non-denominational, it's not religious, I'm not going to try to force anything on you. All I want you to do is to start to tune into the actual life force of the universe and start to experience it meditatively because it is a conscious energy that we can all help participate in. So, here's what I want you to do. First of all, I want you to have both feet flat on the floor. If you've crossed your legs, just uncross them right now, if you don't mind. Give yourself a little stretch. You've probably been sitting in the chair for a long time. Just think about the body a little bit. If you want to stand up, let's go ahead. Everybody stand up. Just give yourself a little stretch, and it'll give me a chance to drink some water. Just give yourself a little stretch. All right. Now again, both feet flat on the floor. I'd like you to close your eyes. And let's start to breathe in the energy of consciousness. Because consciousness is alive. Consciousness is a robust field that makes all of physical matter what it is. Take some deep breaths. Give yourself over to the beauty of this moment, the peace of this moment. Allow yourself to just realize that there's only one of us here. You've now seen the proof that the reason why you exist in this body that's sitting in that chair, you can feel your shirt hanging on your hands or your arms, you can feel your pants, you can feel your shoes, you can feel your socks if you're wearing them. You can feel bracelets, a necklace if you're wearing one. The reason why you exist in this body at this time, as you keep breathing deeply, is because you are experiencing consciousness. You are part of this one infinite creator that decided to separate itself, decided to experience apparent individuality. But the Creator, from these sources, what we're told, is that we're all given free will, and that's the greatest gift we can be given. You have the right to do whatever you want, and nobody is going to stop you. You can make your own decision. The reason why the ETs have not landed on the White House lawn is that not everyone wants to see them. And they're not going to violate our free will. They're going to teach us through mystery, just like they're sending us a message, like a phone ringing, as you just heard in the audience. That's a symbol showing us that there's messages being given all the time if you want to listen for it. Someone is calling on the phone, but do we ever listen? Do we ever heed the call? Do we ever listen to the information that is available in silence? So take some deep breaths. Breathe in the conscious life force that makes you who you are, that is encoded in evolution in your very DNA right now. Because the DNA evolution can occur in different ways. You saw how the lizard, when he's moved from a desert to a tropical oasis, evolved in order to be able to digest and eat plants instead of insects. You're seeing how we are evolving. In the last 5,000 years, we've gotten 100 times faster, so that we're now more different than people in 3000 BC than they were from Neanderthals. That consciousness field is an option. It's an option. You don't have to experience evolution. And if you choose not to love, which is the core of how this energy identifies itself, if you choose to stay in separation, then you're going to be jarred. You're going to have experiences that knock you off balance, what we would call bad karma. One of the principles of this big illusion that we're all living in, according to the esoteric material, is that we are all being given this curriculum of karma. When we do nice things for people, nice things happen to us. And when we manipulate and control other people, we have experiences that bring us back to perfect balance. So realize that when you have a negative karmic event happen, it is returning you to a state of grace. It's scary on the planet right now. There's a lot of things happening that make us seem to be afraid, that make us worried about pole shift, or earth changes, or cataclysms of one variety or another. We're freaked out by the government. We're freaked out by the so-called New World Order or the Illuminati. There's a lot of reasons to be afraid if you are paying attention. And in fact, everybody, as we keep breathing, we can just identify the fact that this fear does exist, that the fear is out there, and that it's something that we're all going through because it's bringing us into a state of awakening. It's bringing us into a higher consciousness now. The reflections of our consciousness are what we're seeing. Meditate on this for a second. The world is a hall of mirrors. There's only one of us here. Everything that we see in the world is a mirror of ourselves. So when we have chaos and dysfunction in our own lives, we see chaos and dysfunction in the rhythms of the world. The earth changes. We see chaos and dysfunction in the governments, in the financial system. These are manifestations on the external level of what's happening inside ourselves. It's a holographic loop. Just like it says in some of these esoteric teachings of create your own reality, you have the option to breathe in this consciousness life force that is loving energy. One of the pieces of data that I often bring in that you didn't see in this talk, as you keep breathing deeply, is that there is an energy that is identified with love that feeds the DNA molecule directly. They've looked at the DNA and found that it captures a particular energy source that will cause light to spiral in the shape of the DNA, even if the DNA is taken away. And this DNA phantom, as it's called, lasts for up to 30 days. The light will spiral as if it was in the DNA, but there's no DNA there anymore. You can't blow it away with liquid nitrogen, it comes back. That again is showing you the energy that makes DNA, that actually is the precursor to DNA. It's the energy that will still be here on this stage after I leave here as a blueprint of myself. And we are all in this universe, blueprints of one infinite creator. But there's only one consciousness. That's what the esoteric material keeps telling us. So as you breathe through this consciousness, you can experience the living presence of that awareness, which is love. Because another DNA experiment by Glenn Ryan shows us, Dr. Glenn Ryan, that when you send loving energy to DNA, it heals DNA that had been killed. And when you send anger energy to DNA, the DNA withers and dies. So love is the fundamental identity of the energy that DNA is harnessing, the energy of the biofield, the energy of time, the energy of physical matter. The whole universe is built from love. Allow yourself in this moment to experience that loving consciousness. Just let go. Okay, so some people have hurt you in the past. Let's just deal with the fact that when you look in the mirror, you may not see exactly what you want. We've got a celebrity-obsessed culture that takes the most beautiful people, puts them on pedestals. We have people chasing after liposuction, Botox, all sorts of different procedures to try to make themselves adhere to some sort of ideal of perfection. But the physical body will fall like a leaf off the tree at the end of the season, and it will lay to rest. Every one of us will physically die. We cannot escape that. It is as inevitable as any other reality that we could face. Doesn't mean we have to be afraid of it. Doesn't mean we have to resent it. We don't need to resent the aging process. We don't need to resent lines forming on our faces, our skin starting to sag, perhaps gaining extra weight, all these things that concern us. Just let go of all that stuff. Because you are a divine being. And even if someone looks you in the eye and cannot see you in love, you can feel compassion for them. Because for that short period of time, they are believing a lie. They are believing that when they see you, that they're seeing the truth. They look at your body, maybe they laughed at you, maybe this is somebody in your past who said mean things to you, accused you of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being strong enough, not being successful enough. Maybe you've judged yourself and wondered why you don't have more money or you don't have more success. Let's just let go of all that stuff, because it's all rooted in fear over the past. Fear over the future and guilt over the past. Those are the two vectors that pull us out of the present. Something happened before, we feel guilty about it. We're worried about something that might happen in the future that hasn't happened yet. That pulls us out of the now. So you may have things in the future that concern you. You may have to pay your light bill and you wonder how you're going to do that in this economy. Let's just set that aside. Let's set aside the fact that you might feel guilty if you hurt someone and they really blamed you for that. They criticized you and told you you were not a good person. And they spelled out their case and gave you all their evidence for why you're bad. Well, ultimately, everybody's here to have experiences, and we all have free will. Every experience is positive and beneficial. It's all part of this one infinite consciousness, experiencing itself, evolving as you breathe in deeply and ride these currents of loving energy that are in the room right now, because as we gather together and meditate together like this, we are living that promise that we can be more than a physical body, that we can be more than a body that is saddled with limitations and aging and death. We are ageless. We are timeless. Even if we have medical problems, physical disabilities, whatever it may be, that is only one stage of where we are. And we will have an immortal body. That's what the prophecies from the Bible and from all these ET channel sources tell us. We are moving into a heaven on earth. The earth will be transformed to a paradise reality, so we're told, in which levitation, telekinesis, instantaneous healing, and all these miraculous things are as ordinary and everyday as breathing. That's the promise, that's the reality that we seem to be heading into here. Just like the Bible said, the mortal must put on immortality. The new man and woman will be from the Lord from heaven. Again, biblical, but it's saying the same thing. Spiritual transformation, turning us into light beings. We don't know what's going to happen in 2012. Many of these prophecies say it's going to be this spontaneous, miraculous change. I would love to believe that's true, and I do believe that's true. But we've also shown you the scientific proof that something is happening. And it's continuing to happen, and it's speeding up. We do seem to be heading towards a change in which all of the shadow material, all of the darkness is being purged and cleansed. When this science that I've shared with you today goes mainstream, when it starts being talked about out in the open, and we realize the power that we have to heal ourselves and to heal our planet, that is the equivalent of the fulfillment of this prophecy. Learning the truth about who we are, dividing up all of these things with religion will not be necessary. We no longer have to judge one another and say, I'm right and you're wrong, because there is a source field, there is a living consciousness that we're all part of. And the thoughts that we have affect everyone else. If we have anger towards one person, if we cause violence, then that violence affects everyone. Now, in this moment, You can transcend all that fear, all that darkness. Just allow yourself, even for a short time, to believe in the possibility that what we're experiencing is not doom and gloom. It is not Armageddon. It is a transformation that you've already seen the evidence for, that you choose to participate in by how much love you have in your heart. And the more you do that, the more that your good karma flows. Living with a respect for yourself, which also means knowing when to say no. If someone hurts you, if someone is trying to mismanage your life and they're trying to take advantage of you and they're trying to knock you down in some way, you have the right to say no. You have the right to walk away from that person if that's what you have to do. Even if they try to tell you that you're obligated to stay and they make it to seem impossible that you could get out of that situation, you are never lost. You are never alone. There is always a solution. If you look within and ask for the answer, it will come to you. Now, in this moment, I want you to experience for yourselves the vibration of the change. And this will come in the form of some toning. If you don't want to do it, that's okay. You can just listen. For those who do decide to participate, I would ask that you use as much volume in your voice as possible when that time comes. Just let yourself be loud. Don't worry about what anybody thinks out in the hallway. We're not concerned about them right now, just for this short time. I want you to breathe at different times. I don't want everybody to breathe at the same time. I want you to take a breath when it's right for you, when other people are not inhaling. And I'm going to give you a tone, which I will start to intone. And I want you to take that tone or another tone, whatever you feel comfortable with. But let's go for a harmonious sound. And I want you, as you do this, to allow yourself to be lifted into this exalted state of consciousness, where the very energy that made your DNA from the background of space itself on this planet is back to its primordial essence. And you can ask, as you're doing this toning, for guidance on any issue that is upsetting you in your life. Ask for the guidance, and you will get the answer. Just empty your mind for everything except the toning. The answer will come to you. Everyone take a deep breath now. In the beauty of this moment, there is light, there is love, there is consciousness, there is infinity, there is foreverness. No space, no time. Only existence. The mystery of how all the universe is your consciousness, that you are a perfect holographic creation of this infinite intelligence. And you can experience it right now, in the stillness. Let's just have a brief pause to do just that. Visualize the energy that we've raised emanating through this room, through this hotel, through Nevada, California, Arizona, all the earth, bathing it in liquid light, just like dipping an Easter egg in dye. Spreading out to the solar system, all the stars in the galaxy, the entire galaxy, brimming with light, out through all the billions of different galaxies, the entire universe, radiant, majestic, just like you. You are loved more than you could ever possibly imagine. And now let's count down, and we will allow ourselves to come back into our bodies. 10, feeling that consciousness, wiggling our toes a little bit. 9, just breathing in the glory of this moment. 8, feeling more and more present back in the room. 7, giving us a conscious awareness. 6, more and more beautiful as we come back into awareness. 5, bringing in the consciousness. 4, wiggling our arms and legs, stretching a little bit. 3, coming back into our full consciousness. 2, we are fully aware, we are fully awake. And 1, we are back in the room. Now, at this time, I would ask that we bring up the house lights. I want to thank you all for coming to this wonderful conference. And everyone, if you feel it's appropriate, let's take the energy we've raised. You can give your neighbor a handshake or a hug as you feel is appropriate to you. Let's just stand up. Don't keep it to yourself. Let's share this energy. And I want to thank you all for listening to my talk. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.